My name is George Whitmore. I am 61 years old, and I was lying on a hospital gurney with a shattered leg when I heard my own son laughing over champagne glasses on the other end of the phone. "We just closed a $22 million deal, Dad," Richard said. "A man who lost 3 farms shouldn't expect us to save him over $3,200. My wife took the phone from him. "Go ask your precious daughter," she sneered, and hung up. Less than an hour later, my daughter Melissa walked into that hospital room, set an envelope on my bed, and whispered, "Dad, I sold my car." Weeks later, my son came pounding on my door. By then, everything had already changed. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now let me take you back 12 years, to a Tuesday morning when 3 black SUVs came up my gravel drive and took everything I'd built. The land smelled like cut hay and diesel, and in late summer, the sweet rot of feed corn drying in the fields. I owned 3 farms outside Fort Bend County, Texas. 420 acres I'd built from 40 acres and a pickup truck over 20 years. Cattle on one, corn and soybeans on the second, hay and livestock feed on the third. My wife Carolyn used to tell the women at church, loud enough for me to hear, "That's my husband. Started with nothing." My son Richard called every Sunday evening back then, full of ideas about expansion, commodity markets, turning 3 farms into 30. My daughter Melissa was the quiet one, 16 years old, pulling on work boots every Saturday without being asked, checking fence lines beside me, handing water to the farmhands before anyone thought to ask her. Evenings on that porch smelled like iced tea sweating on the rail and cicadas going full volume in the pecan trees. Carolyn's hand would find mine in the dark. I thought it would always be that way. One Tuesday morning in October, 3 black SUVs came up my drive. A federal agent named Karen Mills told me a company called Agri-Supply Solutions had been funneling fraudulent subsidy claims through documents bearing my name. $1.4 million over 6 years. My accounts were frozen. My properties seized under an asset control order. I told her I never signed anything like that. She told me the investigation would determine the truth. It took 12 years to find out I was right. Within weeks, the bank pulled my credit. My suppliers canceled. I sold my herd for whatever price desperate men get. Watched 3 mornings of cattle trucks pull away, and felt something tear loose in my chest each time. I sold the tractor my father helped me buy. I took a job at a distribution warehouse off Highway 36. Pinned a name tag that said George to a uniform that never stopped smelling like someone else's sweat. Caroline started leaving my boots outside the back door. She never said it outright, but I understood. The man she'd bragged about at church wasn't the man who came home smelling like cardboard and machine oil. Richard finished his degree, took a job in real estate, and started calling less. When he did call, it was never about the farms anymore. It was about deals, closings, numbers with more zeros than I'd ever touched. I overheard Carolyn on the phone with him once, in the kitchen, thinking I was asleep. "Your father's not going to bounce back from this," she said. "Best you focus on your own future." That's the word they'd started using, I remember thinking. Future, as if I'd already become the past. Melissa never used that word. She kept working, saved money quietly, drove an old sedan she never once complained about, and visited me at the warehouse on her lunch breaks, just to sit with me while I ate a sandwich standing up. I said nothing to either of them about what I was building on the side. I just kept working, and I kept a folder in the glove box of the Silverado that nobody knew existed. 3 years into the investigation, a private attorney named Franklin Osei reached out to me. His firm had been retained by a class of farmers wrongfully implicated in the Agri-Supply Solutions fraud. All of us victims of the same scheme, our signatures forged by a mid-level operations manager who'd used stolen personnel files to authorize claims in our names. Franklin didn't promise anything quickly. He told me these cases moved slowly, but that the evidence against the real perpetrator was solid, and that a federal wrongful seizure settlement, once finalized, would be substantial. He asked me to be patient and to say nothing to anyone, not because it was a secret to hide, but because he'd seen what changes in a family the moment people learn there's money coming. I thought about Caroline's voice in the kitchen. I thought about Richard's calls, thinner every year. I didn't tell them anything. For 9 more years, I drove that forklift, cashed that warehouse paycheck, and let everyone believe George Whitmore had nothing left. Franklin called every few months with updates. The real perpetrator indicted. My name formally cleared. The settlement moving through federal review. 2 months before my accident, he called with a number. $2.1 million. My share of the class settlement, pending final signature. I texted him 2 words that night. Ready. Wait. I hadn't told Melissa. I hadn't told Richard. I wanted to see first who would show up or me before they knew there was anything to show up for. Franklin laid it out plainly. The settlement funds could be directed anywhere I chose. A personal account, a trust, split however I wanted, the moment I signed. He asked who I trusted enough to name as trustee. Richard called twice that month, both times about opportunities he thought I should invest in. Once he learned, through Caroline I suspect, that something was moving with the old investigation. Dad, if any of that money comes through, let's talk. I know people who could triple it. A fake kindness, dressed as advice. I'll think about it, I told him, and gave him nothing else. Melissa noticed something was different before either of them did. You've seemed lighter lately, Dad, she said one Sunday, not asking why, just noticing. The night before the warehouse accident, I sat alone in the Silverado in that same parking lot of Highway 36, engine off, hands on the wheel. I wish this were different. I wish Caroline had stood beside me the way she once did on that porch, instead of measuring what I still had to offer. I wish Richard had asked how I was doing instead of what was coming. But wishes don't rebuild 12 years. The settlement does. I cried in that parking lot, not from weakness, from finally seeing clearly who had stayed and who had only circled. It was 11:50 p.m., 4 days after the accident. My leg in a cast, propped on 2 pillows in a room I was paying off slowly with Melissa's help. I opened my laptop for a video call with Franklin to finalize the settlement paperwork. We went through every page. The trust would name Melissa as sole trustee and primary beneficiary. Richard's name would appear nowhere in the documents. You're doing the right thing, George, Franklin said. For yourself, for the daughter who actually showed up. I signed at 12:03 a.m. 12:03 a.m. I am 61 years old, and in a few weeks, my son is going to learn that the father he wrote off over $3,200 was never as broke as he assumed. Across town, Richard was almost certainly asleep in a house I'd never been invited into, confident that whatever happened to me would eventually become his problem to manage, on his terms. Later, he'd learn otherwise, sooner than he expected. 3 weeks after the settlement cleared, Richard came pounding on my apartment door, Caroline trailing behind him. Word travels fast in a small county when $2.1 million lands in a wrongful seizure case. Dad, why didn't you tell us? He said, already moving past hurt into calculation. We're family. We could have helped you set things up properly. I let him in. I let him sit down. Then I told him the truth, that the money was already placed in an irrevocable trust, that Melissa was trustee, and that his name appeared nowhere in it. He looked at me the way you look at someone you thought you still had time to manage. He didn't. He hadn't for years. You'd let a car mechanic's daughter control $2 million over your own son, Caroline said, her voice climbing. She sold her car for me when I had nothing, I said quietly. You told me to ask her because you didn't want the trouble. I remembered both. Neither of them said much after that. They left within the hour. My father used to say a man works with what he has, not with what he wishes he had. I thought he meant the farms. He meant something bigger. That what you build with your own 2 hands outlasts what you're handed. And what people do for you in your worst hour tells you more than 12 good years ever could. Richard and Caroline moved to a smaller house within the year. His real estate deal slower than he let on. Franklin still checks in every few months, mostly just to see how I'm healing. Melissa never touched a dollar of the trust for herself. She used it to buy back a piece of the old hay farm and put my name back on the deed. As for me, I still drive the Silverado, though the AC finally works now. Some evenings I sit on Melissa's back porch, boots off, iced tea sweating on the rail, and it feels, for the first time in 12 years, permanent again. If you've ever had someone show up for you when it mattered most, I want to hear about them. Tell me in the comments, and if this story moved you, subscribe to Dad's Revenge Tales. There are more to come.